The street is empty. The Christmas lights hum like they're alive. You don't remember your name until you find a photo in your pocket. Hear ho 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 dragging closer through the snow. Then you realize the worst part isn't the dying. And that's just one of 3.
How did you get in here?
Ho, ho, ho. What's that? You want to be scared? Come with me. This is Weekly Spooky.
Hello, my spookies. It's Tuesday, yes I know, but it's almost Christmas, and I have so many gifts left to give you. So don't worry, if you're a big fan of This Week in Horror History, that will be dropping on the feed in just a few hours. But right now I have a very, very special visit from Jack Scratch for this Christmas. 3 terrifying tales to keep you enthralled and in the holiday spirit. But before we get to that, I want to say thank you all so much. This has been the most successful Weekly Spooky holiday season ever. So many new folks have joined us in October, November, and December. And I'm just honored to bring you a little bit of entertainment, even if my throat does not love all the extra work. And make sure you're subscribed if you're not already, because the holidays are not where Weekly Spooky ends. We bring you something terrifying multiple times a week, all year long. So click that subscribe button and leave us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcasting app. It helps us out a lot. And if you really want to support us, you can head to weeklyspooky.com/join and find out how for as little as $1 a month you can get 2 bonus episodes every single month, and of course my undying gratitude. But now, I'm too excited. I want to unwrap the gifts now, and they come in 3s. So pull in close. What if Christmas didn't end when you died? What if it followed you down past the clouds, past the dirt, past the last prayer, and into a place where paperwork is sacred, hope is a trap, and the decorations are just camouflage for something rotten? Because tonight we're not just telling stories, we're opening a door to hell's holiday season, where a man in a red suit isn't here to give gifts, where a mountain of bones glows with a promise you're never meant to reach, and where one machine that can erase you forever waits, silent, hungry, and overdue for a test. So, if you're ready, toss another log on the fire, and whatever you do, do not, under any circumstance, trust the laughter you hear in the dark. Terror at Christmas by Keith Tomlin. The air warped, and a small, cluttered office faded into view. A tall, very thin man sat behind a desk, dressed in simple black pants and a billowing white shirt. His hand moved impossibly fast as he wrote a list of names on old parchment, the quill scratching like a rat in the walls. When the page was full, he capped the quill and put a stopper in the ink. He sat both down with the careful reverence of a man who considered paperwork holy. He then stretched, bones popping and bending to impossible angles. The man sat still for one more heartbeat. Then he exploded into motion. He leapt onto the chair. It spun faster and faster until the man became a blur of black and white. Red streaked through the spin like blood in water. A bright flash filled the room. When it faded, Jack Scratch stood there in all his glory. Dressed in ringmaster attire, his top hat sat at an impossible angle. His red jacket was immaculate. A green vest could be seen beneath it, as though paying tribute to the season, or mocking it. His grin was too wide to be trusted. The walls, which were plain and empty a few seconds ago, were now adorned with Christmas decorations. But upon closer inspection, the corruption could be seen. Debauchery tucked into the garland, corruption peeking out from behind the tinsel, vice woven right into the holiday scenes, like it belonged there. Little cherubs with sharpened teeth, a wreath hung with something that wasn't mistletoe, a stocking that twitched when no one touched it. Jack raised his cane, arms spreading wide, and hopped down from the chair as if stepping onto a stage. "Welcome," he said brightly, "and thank you for accepting my invitation. Not that you had a choice." Spinning his cane at breathtaking speeds, he continued, "I thought it would be amusing to give a few mortals a glance, just a mere glimpse, at hell in all of its glory." His smile sharpened. "Also, I was bored." The cane stopped spinning as quickly as it started. "No worries, my friends. No one can see or hear you." He lowered the cane and pointed down. "A few of my colleagues may suspect mortals are about, but you should be fine. Probably." He held up one finger, suddenly serious, or at least the closest thing Jack had to serious. "First, I want to show you that we take our business very seriously. I've spent the last few hundred years trying to drag this organization out of the Stone Age. In spite of a few reactionaries who insist on maintaining the status quo." His grin returned, warm and wrong. Jack snapped his fingers, and the air shimmered. The Santa Experiment. The man opened his eyes, squinting from the glare of the Christmas lights strung across the awning above him. The bulbs hummed faintly, a wavering tone that one could sense in their dental fillings. He sat up, confused, blinking flakes of snow from his eyelashes. A thin white layer covered the ground. The falling snow seemed to hang in the air for too long before drifting down, each flake catching the yellow glow of the street lamp until the whole night shimmered like a shaken snow globe. Struggling to his feet, he shivered as a cold wind slid beneath his damp shirt and pressed against his spine. He took a moment to steady himself before looking around. He was standing on a narrow sidewalk before a brick building with Fanny's Used Bookstore painted in fading gold across the front window. The other storefronts nearby, Henson's Hardware, Cherry's Cafe, a barber shop where the name on the window was too faded to read in the dim light, were all 1 or 2 stories high, their windows dark but trimmed in strings of colored bulbs. At first glance, it was a postcard scene. Then he saw the rot. Bricks bowed and crumbled. A few of the lights blinked arrhythmically, as though dying. A mannequin in a boutique window stared out through a frost-patterned pane. Its plastic smile cracked. One blue glass eye turned slightly askew. The air smelled faintly of pine, with something sour underneath, like spoiled fruit. A single bulb overhead flickered, buzzed, and went dark. The sudden absence of light made him realize how few bulbs still burned. He looked up and down the street. The dark road stretched empty in both directions. No cars, no footsteps, just the faint sound of something metallic creaking, a sign swaying on a chain somewhere beyond sight. He thought he heard a bell, quick and distant, but when he turned toward it, there was only the whisper of the wind moving through tinsel. He tore his eyes from the street and looked down at himself, trying to find something, anything, that could identify him. He was a rubber band pulled to its breaking point, the tension ratcheted up to 10. He didn't know his name. He didn't know what had happened. Didn't even know what he should feel. Panic? Maybe helplessness. He felt too tired to feel anything. Numb all over. Who am I? It was such a small question with a huge impact. 1,000 little details were gone. The way he took his coffee, whether he had anyone who'd miss him. Did he like pineapple on his pizza? Humans, he thought, were made of memories. Without them, what was left? Just a shape that moved and breathed, pretending to be someone. He shook his head as if he could rattle something loose. No pain, no wounds. He looked down at his clothes. A tweed jacket, much too thin for the cold. A scarf, a flat cap pulled low, corduroy pants, and loafers caked with slush. He looked respectable, maybe even scholarly, like a man who gave lectures on things that didn't matter anymore. He checked his pockets. Empty. His chest tightened. His pulse started to climb. He patted himself down again, desperate, half expecting to feel something that proved he existed. Nothing. A hollow laugh scraped his throat. Perfect, he muttered, his voice hoarse. Then, on a hunch, he slipped his hand into his inside jacket pocket again. His fingers brushed paper, thin and soft from where? A photograph. He drew it out carefully, the edges worn and creased from being handled too much. He stared at the image until the colors began to swim. A woman with long, dark hair and 2 small children in her lap. The woman's smile was tight, forced, as if she wanted whoever held the camera to hurry up. The boy, maybe 5 or 6, had been crying, his cheeks puffy, one eye swollen. The little girl, no older than 3, was laughing so hard her face was a blur. The sight hit him in the chest, a pulse of warmth and grief all at once. Something stirred in the back of his skull, the faintest whisper of familiarity. And then, her laugh. He could hear it, bright, infectious, spilling through the air. He could hear his own voice, silly, high-pitched, doing that Elmo impression that always made her squeal with delight. That was it. The memory cracked open, and the past came rushing in. The picnic. Ellen, his wife, had packed sandwiches and a checkered blanket. The boy, Nicky, had been stung by a bee and was in a full meltdown when Ellen tried to soothe him and keep Becca from running toward the pond. He remembered laughing, camera in hand, as Ellen glared at him over the chaos. "Stephen Thomas Franklin," she snapped, half exasperated, half smiling. "You have 3 seconds to take the picture, or I'll make you hold the kids while I do it." He laughed out loud now, right there in the empty street. The sound startled him. It was too sharp, too alive. His breath fogged the air, and for a moment, the lights around him seemed brighter, kinder. He felt like someone waking from a long dream. Stephen Thomas Franklin. That was his name. A husband, a father. The picnic took place at the college where he was a professor of philosophy, of all things. The details of his life beyond that picnic were still hidden, blurred at the edges like the faces of strangers. But that one memory burned bright and perfect. A single island of light in the dark. He pressed the photo to his chest and let out a long, shaky breath. "I remember," he whispered, almost laughing. "I remember." Somewhere behind him, there was a laugh. Just a quick chuckle, but it echoed in the night air. The laugh was a reminder that even if he did get a small portion of his life back, there were other things in the darkness that he still needed to deal with. Putting the picture back in his pocket, he walked past the run-down shops and boarded-up townhouses, some with strings of holiday lights, with bulbs missing, but most were dark, holes in the night. The wind kicked up again, and he shivered, pulling his jacket tighter around him. A sound was carried by the wind, faint at first, but it grew louder. It was a sarcastic, almost mocking mantra of "Ho, ho, ho." Stephen began to move faster, looking around, trying to pinpoint where the sound was coming from. Looking behind him a few blocks away, he saw a tall man, dressed as Santa Claus, step out of a dark doorway. He strolled to the middle of the street and turned to stare at Stephen. He stopped and stared back, feeling like a deer caught in headlights. He watched as Santa moved the arm that was behind his back, revealing a large fireman's axe. Ho, ho, ho. The head of the axe bounced slightly when it hit the ground. Santa, still holding the weapon by the handle, strolled forward, like he didn't have a care in the world. The head of the axe making a scraping sound as Santa dragged it behind him. Stephen felt the photo through his jacket pocket and thought, "I need to get back to my family." With that thought, he turned and ran. Santa let out a loud, "Ho, ho, ho," followed by maniacal laughter. The laughter seemed to surround Stephen as he ran. Christmas lights flashed by as Stephen went. No music, no street sounds, nothing except for the wind and the sound of his feet hitting the pavement. When his chest burned and he was gasping for breath, he finally stopped and leaned against a streetlight. As he caught his wind, he could hear something metal being dragged across the ground. He looked behind him and saw Santa strolling towards him, the axe still trailing behind. Ho, ho, ho. Stephen thought, how could he be back there? That's not possible. He started to run again, past windows decorated with strands of Christmas lights, past doorways strung with garland, oblivious to all except moving one foot in front of the other. After countless minutes, he turned a corner, gasping for breath. Seeing a dark alleyway, he ducked into it. The alley had tall buildings on each side, blocking out the moonlight. Pausing to finish catching his breath, Stephen peered around the corner and right into Santa's gaze. He couldn't see it because of the beard, but Stephen knew that Santa was smiling. From over a block away, he raised the axe and threw it, one-handed. Caught in the light of the street lamp, the axe twinkled like a star, flying right at Stephen. Stunned, he watched it twirl through the air and slam into the brick wall next to his head, burying itself into the bricks, its handle vibrating from the force of the throw. Jerking his head back, he finally turned and ran down the alley. He tripped over some wet, empty cardboard boxes and plowed head first into a pile of broken pallets. Coming up with splinters embedded in his palm, he clamped his hand under his arm and kept moving, feet slapping cold paving bricks, his breath coming in gasps. Exiting the alley, he crossed a tiny park fenced in with waist-high wrought iron. He stared for half a second at 3 plastic candy canes, half buried in a snowbank, and then kept moving. Ignoring the sound, Stephen looked ahead of him and noticed a large 3-story structure. It looked like a parking garage. Thinking that he could maybe find some help or a car with keys, he headed for it, trying not to pay attention to the pains in his chest. He burst into the mouth of a parking garage, the muscles in his thigh cramping as he limped up the short ramp. Blinking fluorescent tubes hummed overhead, and the air smelled like antifreeze and grease. The garage was empty. No cars in sight. He ran among the columns until he heard the noise of metal being dragged on concrete. Stepping behind a pillar, he tried to make himself as small as possible, fighting to keep his gasping breath from being heard over the wind that blew in, over the half walls that made up the perimeter of the building. A shadow was cast on the wall behind Stephen as Santa stepped into the garage. Ho, 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 reverberated throughout the structure. There was triumph in his voice, like a hunter that finally tracked down his prey. Stephen reached behind him and felt around. His hand touched the shaft of a metal pipe. Santa strode confidently down the driving lane, his head swiveling back and forth. The manic grin on his face unnerving Stephen almost as much as the sound of the axe being dragged on the concrete. When Santa passed him, Stephen raised the pipe high in the air and rushed out from behind the pillar, roaring in anger and frustration. His screams seemed to catch Santa off guard. He turned toward Stephen just as he brought the pipe down on his head with all his might. It hit Santa in the side of the skull, and he went down to one knee. Turning to look at Stephen, he noticed that Santa's eyes were reptilian. It grinned up at Stephen, a forked tongue flicked out of its mouth. Stephen paused, shocked at the revelation. What the hell is this thing? Ran through his head as he stood there, pipe raised in the air. The creature dressed as Santa seemed to grin as it opened its mouth, exposing rows of razor-sharp teeth that glimmered in the fluorescent light. Ho! Ho! It began to say as Stephen brought the pipe down, cutting it short. He swung the pipe until the creature was laying on the ground, a bloody mess. He finally stopped when his arm shook with the effort of raising the pipe. Stephen turned and headed toward a pile of boxes covered with an old painter's tarp. Ripping the tarp away, he kicked the boxes, most of which contained construction supplies. He spotted a road flare and put it in his pocket. Starting to turn away, he saw the red of a gas can and grabbed it too. He half-carried, half-dragged the 5-gallon jug over to the creature, his arms trembling with the effort. The creature started to twitch as Stephen stood above it. He didn't wait for any further movement. He dropped the pipe and grabbed the can with both hands. Emptying it over the creature, he was assaulted with the odor of stale gasoline and burning in his eyes. After the can was empty, the creature was soaked. Stephen threw the can aside and backed up several steps. The Santa creature began to move, pushing itself up on its knees. Stephen panicked and pulled the flare from his pocket, almost dropping it. After a few tries, he was able to light it. He glanced over at the creature and was shocked to find that it was standing, although shakily. Without thinking, he threw the flare and caught Santa in the chest. Fire leapt like it had been in waiting. The fur trim lit first, orange flames leaping upwards. The beard went at the edges and curled into black strings. The flames then flowed downward, and the creature went up like a candle. An inhuman cry echoed off the concrete walls. After a few minutes of floundering around, it finally stopped moving. The garage grew noticeably darker as the flames subsided and went out. Stephen took several steps back until he bumped against a concrete pillar and slid down to rest on the floor, eyes stinging from the gas that had splashed onto his jacket. With tired arms, he fumbled around his pockets and pulled out the photograph of his family. His eyes misted as he stared at the figure in the photo, trying to remember more details, but failing. As the numbness crept into his bones, Stephen laid his head back and closed his eyes, allowing his mind to drift away as he gave in to the exhaustion and the biting cold. He lay there for minutes, or maybe hours, on the edge of consciousness, unmoving, until the sound of something scraping against concrete brought him back around. He opened his eyes and saw the Santa creature pushing itself up onto its knees, both reptilian eyes staring at him, unblinking, his face a mess of charred flesh and hunks of cheap polyester beard. His cheeks were missing, and he grinned with his whole face, his sharp, pointed teeth looking predatory in the dim light. Stephen tried to stand, to run, but his leg was numb and wouldn't support his weight. He slumped down to the ground a second time and watched in horror as the creature slowly stood. It reached down and grabbed the axe, flesh from its hand and arms falling off like a snake shedding its skin. Stephen screamed, "No!" as Santa slowly made its way to him. It raised the axe and brought it down violently, silencing Stephen's cries. It struck again and again, punctuating each hit with a jolly ho, ho, ho. Jarak watched the axe slam down several times, making sure the subject was dead. He reached over and shut off the monitor, laying down the clipboard after making a few notes. He stood there, tapping his fingers along the top of the massive control panel that stretched across the room. It was dimly lit and looked like a smaller version of the control room used during the NASA moon landings. The wall in front of Jarak was taken up by a high-definition screen with smaller monitors off to the left and right. 2 more people sat to Jarak's left, each in front of monitors with keyboard and mouse. These men were dressed in khakis, short-sleeve white shirts, headphones, and dark blue ties. Jarak was dressed the same, except that his tie was red. Blood red. Jarak stood there for minutes, fingers drumming, thinking about the results. The man on the far left, Martin, finally cleared his throat. Jarak started as if waking from a dream and gave the men a dirty look. "What?" he snarled. Martin looked terrified, but he quickly answered. "Why are we doing this? Seems like a lot of trouble to go through for another dead human." Jarak stared at him until Martin seemed to shrink and avoided the other man's eyes. Finally, he spoke. "Studies have shown that there is a drop in the terror rate of 7.3% every century, when level set for all forms of torture. That's with a memory wipe between each session. The drop is greater when no wipe is performed. Varying the type of torture reduces the drop to around 5%, but that's still unacceptable. The theory that I'm trying to prove is that, with our current memory wiping methodology, some residue of traumatic or monumental memories are left in the subconscious. Over time, these can rise to the surface and unconsciously affect the subject's behavior." Jarak's voice rose passionately as he warms up to his favorite subject. "Take a look at this run. We ran this scenario." Jarak checks the clipboard in front of him. 735 times, and in the last 45 or so, he recognized the people in the picture as his wife and kids. After he discovered the gasoline and flare, he went straight to it 62% of the time. Remember that we wiped his memory between each session, and yet he seemed to have remembered it. We need to prove that there is an issue with the wipe before they'll let me test out my correction. Jarak realized that he was waving his arms around to punctuate each point. He looked at his audience. Martin was fixated on him. The other one looked bored. "Anyway, let's mix things up. For the next 100 sessions, let's slowly change out the picture so each of the people in it looks less like his family. That way we can tell how specific the suppressed memory is. Also, fill the gas can with water. I want to see how long it takes before he stops going to it. Jarak looked at each of the 2 technicians to see if they understood. They nodded and began to adjust controls. After a few minutes, Martin takes off his headset and nervously rubs the 2 small horns sticking out of the top of his head. He sheepishly speaks. "May I ask a question?" Jarak, who was lost in thought again, looked at the younger demon. He'll have to keep an eye on this one, he thought, warily. After a moment, he nodded. "I understand what you're trying to prove, but what I don't get is why is the killer dressed up like Santa Claus?" Jarak smiled for the first time. "That's easy. I fucking love Christmas." "Somebody deserves a raise," Jack shouted, clapping his hands together. "You see? Innovation, initiative. It warms my shriveled little heart to see technology used for the betterment of the human race." He twirled his cane as he strutted down a stone corridor, boots clicking in time with his steps. The walls were ribbed with bone and iron, lit by torches whose flames bent toward him as he passed. "Move along, people, all aboard," he called over his shoulder. "Trust me, you do not want to be left behind." Jack made it halfway down the corridor before stopping abruptly. He turned, spread his arms wide, and waved his hands in a grand, theatrical flourish. The air rippled. A circle of shimmering light tore itself open, expanding until it filled the entire width of the corridor. On the other side, darkness and something pale stacked high, barely visible. "Come on, kiddos," Jack said, gesturing toward the portal with his cane. "Everybody knows you can't visit hell and not see the Great Bone Mountain." He grinned, eyes gleaming. "Maybe if you behave, I'll show you the pit of never-ending torment. It really gives you a new perspective on life." Christmas Bones. The wind blew across the summit of a mountain made of skulls and bones, with the acrid scent of brimstone and sulfur. Dozens of the lost souls of humanity clinging to the side of the mountain, seeking the top. Standing on the flat peak stood 2 demons. Their twisted bodies were gaunt and covered with ash from the dead. Horns protrude from their skulls and wrapped around behind their ears and ended in a point near each cheek. The screams of the tortured and dying, brought up by the wind reverberating all around them, but centuries of exposure had given them the ability to unconsciously tune them out. Blood-sucking flying insects surround them, trying to pierce their leathery skin, only to fall prey to the demons' whip-like tails. Each one of them holds a long pitchfork with a handle made from bone. Behind them is a ring of light that radiated peace and tranquility. The ring of light seems to make the demons uncomfortable, and they purposefully do not look in that direction. One demon, slightly smaller than the other, turns and speaks. "So, it seems a bit slow lately," Othrin said. "Yes, it does, although I'm not complaining," Cravat replied. "Yep, me neither." Othrin takes a moment to examine his pitchfork. I think one of the tines is bent. I may need another one soon." Cravat looked at his partner, confused. Normally, Othran was a demon of few words, but today he was downright chatty. "You better take it easy on that. You only get 3 per rotation. After that, you'll have to take care of the lost souls with your bare hands." An uncomfortable silence filled the space between the two. The monotony was only broken by the occasional lost soul who reached the top of Bone Mountain, only to be thrown off by one of the demons. Finally, as if the silence became too much, Othran cleared his throat. I think it may be Christmas up there." Cravat looked at Othran as if he was insane. "Wait, what?" he said. "Christmas, it feels like Christmas." "Oh," Cravat replied. Looking confused, he continued. "Why do you think that?" Othran, feeling embarrassed, just nods toward the glowing circle of light. Giving a quick glance behind them, both demons shivered and shook as if something ran across their grave. There were only a few gateways between heaven and hell, and this circle of light was one of them. Neither guard knew why the gateway existed, but Othran once heard one of the winged overseer demons say that nothing creates hope more than having an escape to salvation nearby, and nothing makes the pain and betrayal taste sweeter than taking away hope from the lost souls of humanity at the last moment. "Okay," was all that Cravat said as he watched one of the lost souls climb over the edge onto the summit. This one was a naked man, covered in blood, a thigh bone jutting out of his side. He stumbled to his feet. As the man saw the ring of light, his face lit up with pure joy, and he ran toward the light, forgetting his countless wounds. Freedom! His voice croaked. Othran rushed at him and thrust the pitchfork forward, spearing him in the abdomen. With an amazing show of strength, he lifted the man into the air and flung the still smiling soul into the air and over the edge. He returned to his position next to Cravat, and they both stood there silently for some time. Maybe minutes, maybe hours. In hell, time worked strangely. "Are you happy?" Othran asked. Cravat looked at his companion, shocked. "Of course not. We're in hell. I'm just glad I'm no longer one of those things." He pointed downward. "If there's pain involved, I'd rather give than receive." Othran pressed. "I mean, what's the point? Why do we do this?" "Look," Cravat whispered, looking straight ahead. "Don't let one of the others hear you talk like that, or you'll be back down there and I'll be throwing you off the mountain." Cravat risked a sideways glance to see if his words hit home. Another of the lost clawed their way to the summit, a woman this time. Amazingly, she still had part of a blouse that clung to her shoulders, glued on by blood. She laid at the edge for a few moments before she looked up and saw the glowing ring of light. "My lord, I'm coming." She forced herself to her feet and stumbled forward, at which point Cravat slammed his pitchfork into her stomach. Roaring, he lifted her up and flicked her uncaringly over the edge. Her screams slowly fade away. Cravat walks back to his partner. See? It's not difficult. If someone runs towards the light, you spear them and toss them over the edge. Simple, easy. End of story. But why? Othrin wondered out loud. By the pit, we've been doing this for 1,000 years, and if we keep doing it for 1,000 more, maybe we'll move up to overseer, where we'll get a day off every decade or so. Don't ruin this for me, Cravat warned. Othrin didn't speak for a long time. He took his turns flinging souls from the mountain, although he moved almost mechanically, all joy gone from his actions. He finally spoke, although more to himself than to Cravat. I don't know how, but I suddenly remember getting a red bicycle when I was a kid. He sighed. I loved that bike. Cravat groaned in frustration. Knowing how noises carry, he tried to keep his voice quiet and calm. No, you can't remember. That's one of the perks of being a demon. Everything you did or knew as a human is wiped away. Now stop this shit before you get us in trouble. I remember snow, bells, the scent of pine. I was such a good kid. I wonder where I went wrong, Othrin said in a melancholy tone. Cravat shook his head and snorted. I give up. You're on your own. He turned and saw that a woman had climbed to the top and had started running toward the light, screaming about how the Lord is going to save her. It's your turn, Cravat said. When he received no reply from his partner, he grunted and moved forward to intercept the lost one. When Cravat moved away, Othrin looked toward the light, which did not hurt his eyes, as it did before. He could have sworn that the light grew brighter and began to pulse with his heartbeat. He stared, opened mouth, at the ring, and memories of Christmas past began to flood into his mind. Days prior, John glanced at the summit a few hundred yards above him. He collapsed onto the bones that make up the mountain. He could feel the pull, the unrelenting optimism and redemption from the top of the mountain, demanding that he moves forward. John composed himself and started moving upward again. His life prior to this was fuzzy. He could remember that people called him John, but the only details from his life he could recall were the bad stuff, the sin and the hurt he caused others. He remembered shoplifting as a teenager, cheating on his taxes and his ex-wives, and misleading his customers about the used cars he would try and sell them. Nothing big, all minor stuff, except for one night. That night, he made the choice to drink and then get behind the wheel. The man driving the car that John hit didn't die, but he did spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. After getting released from prison, John cleaned up and stopped drinking. He started going to church and found a God-fearing woman to settle down with. Should one night, one bad choice consign you to an eternity of suffering? Shaking his head to clear it, he looked up and saw a golden light illuminating the ridge just above him. He forgot everything except the light and the pull it exerted on him. Peace and love radiated from the light, and he began to climb faster, ignoring all the sharp edges from the broken bones he had to crawl over. He made it to the edge, blood seeping from 100 different wounds. He pulled himself over and laid there for a second, trying to will himself to stand. When he was finally able to rise up, he began shuffling to the light on shaky legs. His vision tunneled, and all he could see or think about was the beam of light shooting up into the sky. He was halfway there when something sprang up in front of him. He tried to sidestep to the left when piercing pain brought him back to reality. He stared into the face of a demon, so alien, yet familiar. The thing smiled and then screamed in triumph. John felt himself being lifted into the air, his body sliding down the tines of the pitchfork. A sudden thrust sent him flying over the edge, and he fell. John seemed to fall forever, the pain in his stomach overriding the other terrible pains all across his body. He watched the glow of the yellow light fade as he fell, and with it, his hope. After what felt like hours, he finally hit the ground, and his world went black. When he woke, his body was bloody. The pain overshadowed any other that he felt so far. His bones were shattered, and his spirit was broken. Well, what do we have here? A large, animalistic face appeared above him. John focused and saw a winged devil standing next to him. In a voice that was surprisingly smooth and understanding, he purred. You must not have wanted it enough, but Satan is generous. He'll give you another chance. Redemption awaits those who climb the mountain, reach the golden light, and heaven will take you. The overseer reached down and touched John on the forehead. He screamed as his bones knit back together, one at a time, filling his entire being with unimaginable agony. The process seemed to take days, and, although John was on the edge of passing out the entire time, he stayed conscious. Afterwards, he laid there, screaming, but fully healed. Eventually, he turned his head and saw the mountain of bone. Slowly getting to his feet, he began heading to the pile and to the light. Days later, Cravat threw up his hands in frustration. You are insane. That's not how things work here. You put your head down, do your job, and maybe, just maybe in a couple of 1,000 years, you'll get promoted. Maybe even get some time off. Shaking his head, Othran spoke at almost a whisper. That's not how things should be. We should not hurt others for any reason. This is hell, Cravat screamed. This is what we do. This is who we are. That doesn't make it right, Othran retorted. John climbed onto the summit and rolled on his back, catching his breath. He could barely hear the din of an argument, but the pulsating ping from the light drowned out all other noise. He climbed to his feet and began to hobble toward the light. Cravat stood in front of John, his pitchfork held high, his weapon poised to strike. Just as he began to bring the pitchfork forward, he experienced a horrible pain. He looked down at the 3 prongs that protruded from his stomach. The breath of Othran tickled the back of his neck as the renegade yelled, "No more killing!" Cravat was then lifted into the air and flung over the side. His screams slowly faded as he disappeared from sight. John continued on, stopping only at the edge of the circle of light. With tears flowing down his cheek and a prayer on his lips, he stepped forward. All of his wounds faded away. Peace and love filled his core until he felt like he would explode. Looking down, he realized that he was floating up toward the heavens. "Finally," he said, "peace," as he shot up into the sky in a dazzling streak of light. Othran stared at the empty space where Cravat plummeted. The pulsating light from the ring broke him out of his trance. He turned and sprinted toward the ring of light, which seemed to have grown since he last looked. When he approached the edge, he leaped into the light and exploded in a shower of sparks, a smile on his face. You could hear the words, "Forgive me," echo throughout the area. The sparks rained down far and wide. One landed on Overseer Gorkal, who absently rubbed the spot between his horns where it landed. He raised his whip to give this lost human another lash when he suddenly stopped. The smell of hot chocolate filled his nostrils, and he remembered spending Christmas at his grandmother's. He shook his head and began whipping the lost one again, although with less enthusiasm. He kept thinking of putting up Christmas trees, listening to stories by the fireplace, dinner of roasted chicken. The whip moved slower, the passion for his work draining from him. He risked a look up at the faint light on the distant Bone Mountain and sighed. Jack Scratch stepped out from behind a pillar of skulls, brushing imaginary dust from his red sleeve. "Ah," he sighed contentedly. "Nothing like a good pile of bones to remind you how temporary things are. Festive in its own way." He tapped his cane once against the stone floor. The echo lingered longer than it should have. "But let's move on, shall we? We've had our fun with spectacle." He glanced back over his shoulder, where the distant sound of shifting bones still whispered to itself. "Now I want to show you something a little more instructional." Jack began walking, and the landscape around him subtly changed, a corridor slowly materializing behind them. The jagged blocks of limestone gave way to older stone, cleaner lines, purpose-built, less art, more architecture. "This is the part of hell most tourists never see," he said lightly. "No screaming choirs, no elaborate pageantry, just intake, assessment, and processing." He smiled without warmth. "Efficiency." He stopped beside a wide, circular chamber carved into the rock. The air here was heavier, hotter, and threaded with a sound like distant breathing. Jack walked out on a balcony and pointed to the valley below. "Every soul comes through here," Jack continued. "Every single one. Lines, doors, clipboards, forms in triplicate. It's all very civilized." He leaned closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. Most of them think the worst thing about hell is the pain. Jack straightened and snapped his fingers. They're wrong. Jack's grin returned, slow, knowing, sharp. The worst thing is the anticipation of pain. He laughed and then peered over the edge of the stone railing to watch the procession below. The furnace. Surrounded on all sides by tall, sheer cliffs of red clay, lay a circle of stone doorways set into a cracked flagstone floor. The air stank of sulfur and scorched earth, and a faint, almost human moan echoed through the canyon as wind scraped across the cliff faces. From the center of the circle, a line of human souls stretched toward a holding area carved into the cliffs. Thousands of the newly dead, in various states of undress, shuffled forward with the slow inevitability of a factory line. All but one trembled in terror and confusion. Minor demons with short horns, pitchforks, and the temperaments of irritated bureaucrats stalked the queue, snapping orders and prodding the laggards. A robed demon stood at the center, judging each soul brought before him and assigning them to one of the doorways. A guard would then escort the lost one through the selected portal, where each vanished in a dim flash of red light. Only one soul showed no fear. He waited patiently, nodding politely to the guards, who increasingly went out of their way to avoid eye contact with him. He unsettled them, and unsettling a demon was an accomplishment. One of them risked a glance at the human. An old-fashioned nightgown, a drooping nightcap, a long white beard that shimmered faintly, as though touched by frost. His belly was round, but his muscles beneath the cloth were taut, corded with strength. And when he stepped forward, the air cooled almost imperceptibly around him. When the robed demon finally barked, "Next!" the man ambled forward, accompanied by a guard who still refused to look at him. Krekia the Chooser looked vaguely human, except for his reptilian skin and the small horns jutting from a mop of gray hair. In demonic circles he was well known, the one who met every lost soul, stared into their eyes, and instantly divined which torment would break them best. As the rotund man approached, Krekia checked the sparse notes on his clipboard, sighed, and lifted his gaze. He froze. The man's calm, steady eyes pierced straight through him. The clarity in them shook Krekia to his core. Nothing scares him? The demon wasn't sure how long he stood with his mouth hanging open before the man leaned slightly closer and whispered, loud enough for every guard to hear, "It's all right, son. Do what you gotta do." Krekia jerked himself back to focus. Right. Send this man to the drowning pool." He gestured to the guard, grateful to be rid of this one. His power had failed him for the first time in centuries. He couldn't see which torment would terrify the old man most, so he chose at random. But, honestly, everyone hates drowning. Krekia's nerves still hadn't settled by the time he reached the overseer's chamber. The stone door radiated enough heat to blister mortal skin, but he pushed it open without hesitation. Inside, Growlith, overseer of torments, hunched over his desk, his wings almost hitting the ceiling. He dipped a claw from his right hand into ink and started updating records on the ancient parchments. When the smaller demon approached his desk, he didn't bother looking up. "What now?" he muttered, already annoyed. Krekia clasped his hands behind his back, trying to stop them from trembling. "We have a complication at the drowning pool." "There's always a complication at the drowning pool. If they're fighting, put more weight on them. If they're trying to escape..." "He didn't try to escape, sir." Grolith's claw paused mid-stroke. "Then what did he do?" Krekia inhaled. "It's more like what he didn't do." Grolith slowly lifted his gaze. He took a few seconds to push back the rage he felt at this little creature. Grolith spoke, each word dripping with implied violence. "What didn't he do?" Krekia swallowed hard. "He didn't drown. In fact, he, seemed to have enjoyed it." Putting his claws on the arms of the chair was the only thing that prevented Grolith from tearing the horns out of Krekia's skull. "How can that be?" he said. "It is a drowning pool. Drowning people is the one thing it is designed to accomplish." "Yes, sir, which is why I came directly to you." A long breath escaped Grolith. "Show me." They made their way down the corridor into the drowning cavern. Steam drifted along the floor, smelling faintly of rust and heated stone. The pool churned in its usual violent rhythm, dark water boiling and pooling down below. But the expected shouts, commands, and gasping souls were absent. Instead, the two demons assigned to guard the pool sat on the sandy bank, knees drawn up to their chests, muttering at each other. Their bodies were as imposing as ever, scaled, muscular, horned, but their expressions were slack and unfocused. Their voices were oddly high, as though filtered through the mind of a child. "That's my sand!" one demon whined, sliding a small pile of sand to his side. "You're not even playing right," the other snapped, jumping to his feet. "You're messing it all up," he said, using his hoofed foot to knock down a castle wall made from sand. Krekia stopped short. Grolith did too. The demons hadn't changed physically, but their demeanor, their tone, their complete lack of awareness of their surroundings, it was unmistakable. "Sir," Krekia said quietly, "they were competent when I left them." Grolith said nothing. His jaw flexed once. One of the demons looked up at them, confused. "Are we in trouble?" he asked, the words wobbling like a frightened child's. The other demon immediately pointed at him. "He did it! It was him!" "I did not!" the first shrieked, bursting into tears. Before Krekia could intervene, the crying demon turned, spotted the drowning pool, and gasped. "The water's scary," he whispered, trembling. "I don't like it." Krekia closed his eyes for a moment. 4-year-olds, he realized grimly. They've regressed to 4-year-olds. Grolith's gaze moved past them. "Where is the soul?" Krekia looked around, then pointed towards the right. A portly human lay on the warm sand near the water's edge, hands behind his head, eyes half closed, as if enjoying the heat of the cavern. His nightcap had been pushed back, his beard drying in soft curls. He was the embodiment of relaxation. He could have been mistaken for one of the thousands of vacationers in the Caribbean, sunning themselves at a resort. The only elements breaking the illusion were the lack of actual sunshine and the fact that he was wearing a nightgown. He turned his head slightly and offered a cordial nod. "Afternoon, gentlemen." Growlithe didn't respond. Krekia swallowed. "They kept holding him under, sir. Each time, longer than before," Krekia said quietly. "When he surfaced, he seemed rested, jovial even." "And what happened to the guards?" Growlithe asked. "They were fine when I left, taking turns dunking the human, but now," Krekia gestured at the two demons, sitting side by side, drawing pictures in the sand with their claws. One leaned over and whispered something. The other giggled uncontrollably. Krekia looked back at Growlithe and shrugged. Growlithe felt like he needed to clamp down, hard. "Very well," the overseer said at last. "We need to set an example. I'll assign him to Cray the Cruel." Cray the Cruel was an ancient demon, one of the oldest and most feared. It is said that he can break anyone's spirit with just 3 cracks of his whip. "Yes, sir," Krekia nodded and approached the reclining man. "You've been reassigned." The man sat up easily, brushed a bit of sand from his gown, and smiled. "Whatever you need." Krekia led him toward the iron-rimmed doorway, carved with hooks and nails. Behind him, one of the child-minded demons began to cry again. Growlithe watched them leave, hoping he'd seen the last of the white-haired human. The iron door to Brackmore's office stood half open, leaking a faint red glow into the hallway. The light came from a collection of floating embers suspended above his desk, drifting like captive stars. Brackmore preferred them to torches. He enjoyed the slow sizzle of the embers rather than the spark and pop of an open flame. The sector overseer of Torment Division 4 leaned over a large obsidian map table, studying the carved layout of Hell's lower chambers. Small runes glowed wherever a sector reported activity, flickering orange for routine torment, steady red for failures, bright white for incidents requiring intervention. A single point glowed in a soft blue, Jack Scratch's domain. Brackmore traced a claw over it, eyes narrowing. "Soon," he murmured. "The old showman won't see it coming. One final step, and the stage is mine." He reached for a bone quill, scratching notes into a private ledger, the kind that erased itself if anyone but Brackmore touched it. He was halfway through recording the next stage of his coup when a frantic knock rattled the iron door. Brackmore's wings shifted slightly, annoyance crackling through his calm. "Enter," he said, without turning. Growlithe hurried inside, steam rising from his shoulders where sweat touched heated air. He bowed stiffly. "Sector Overseer Brackmore, we have a problem." Brackmore didn't look up. "There are always problems. That's why I have subordinates." "This is not routine, sir." Brackmore finally raised his eyes. "Explain." Growlithe cleared his throat. "A soul arrived this cycle, human, elderly, appears harmless. However," he hesitated. Brackmore motioned sharply for him to continue. "The drowning pool did not harm him. We attempted full submersion, repeated cycles, increased durations. He resisted everything. calmly. Brackmore blinked once. Impossible. Yes, sir, that's what I thought. Growlithe swallowed. I then assigned him to Cray, figuring that we needed to use the soul as an example of what happens to those who defy us. And what happened? Brackmore asked. The human is unscathed. It seemed that nothing that Cray had could pierce his skin. Growlithe stopped speaking, but he clearly had more to say. And? Brackmore prompted. Cray is in his room and won't come out. He says that everyone is mad at him, and Brackmore stared at Growlithe until he started talking again. He called everyone big meanies. Brackmore looked confused. Wait, you mean that one of the oldest and most feared demons used the term big meanie? Growlithe looked aghast. Yes, sir. 2 guards in the drowning pool also suffered mental regression. They retained physical form, but developed the cognition of human children. We believe the soul caused this. Brackmore straightened slowly, expression tightening. His tail twitched once, a sharp, irritated flick. And why, he said quietly, did you bring this irregularity to me? Because, Growlithe answered, voice strained, I am no longer certain the situation can be contained at my level. Brackmore closed the ledger, carefully, as though afraid the sound might betray something, and stepped around the table. His shadow stretched across the floor, long and branching like cracks in the stone. We are on the threshold of significant administrative restructuring, he said, the kind that draws attention from dangerous eyes. I cannot afford scrutiny in my sector right now, not from Scratch, not from the Dark One, not from anyone. Growlithe frowned. How should we handle the soul, sir? Brackmore clasped his hands behind his back. We will place him in the eternal furnace. The eternal furnace was the one thing that could destroy a soul, human or demon. For this reason it was strictly regulated and rarely used, falling out of favor over the last 10 centuries or so. Growlithe's eyes widened. Sector Overseer, that requires direct authorization from the Dark One himself. A soul cannot simply be... It can, Brackmore interrupted. If the records show a test fire, the furnace is due for one. The logs will reflect exactly that. No deviation, no unusual entries. Growlithe shook his head. But, sir, a test fire requires... I will handle the records, Brackmore said sharply. Your responsibility ends at the furnace door. Growlithe hesitated, torn between obedience and fear. Sir, the soul is unlike anything I have seen. Putting him into the furnace may draw even more attention if nothing, Brackmore snapped. You will deliver him to the furnace chamber, log the incident as a routine system check, and remove any trace of his presence from the intake registry. When the Dark One reviews the heat signatures, he will see what he expects to see. Growlithe bowed, despite the visible tension in his posture. As you command. Brackmore's voice dropped to a low growl. Dismissed. Growlithe hurried out, closing the iron door behind him. Brackmore remained still for a moment, staring at the spot where the blue light lit the map. Jack Scratch's territory. Then he whispered, Not now. Not when I'm this close. Above him, the ember lights flickered uneasily, as though disturbed by some presence, neither demon yet understood. Elgor looked over at his partner Tharn. "I have a bad feeling about this," Tharn answered as he pushed the fat old man ahead of him. "You have a bad feeling about everything. You worry too much." "Come on," Elgor said. "We were told to throw this human in the furnace and then log it as a test fire. If they're willing to delete a human without the proper approvals, what do you think they would do to witnesses?" "I just do what I'm told," Tharn said, stretching his small wings. The human stopped and faced them. "I'm so sorry that I'm responsible for all this trouble. I can fill out the logs myself if that would help you out." Tharn pushed the man so hard that he almost fell, keeping upright only by grabbing onto one of the statues of a gargoyle that lined the hallway. The man shrugged and continued walking. The walk took them out of the commonly used corridors and into an ancient section. The stone changed here, less ornamental and more functional. Long halls, broken by the occasional stone door. Soon the screams of the tortured and damned faded away, adding to the unease of Elgor. Tharn still seemed unfazed. "This place was here before the redesigns," Elgor muttered, mostly to himself. The human whistled appreciatively. "They don't build them like this anymore." That earned him a sharp look, but the guard didn't correct him. At the end of the corridor, the eternal furnace waited. The guard stood before a large metal door embedded into the bedrock itself. It was enormous, an iron monolith with its surface etched with sigils meant to unmake rather than harm. The guards stood at the left and right of the door, and, nodding to each other, they both pushed a button on their control panel at the same time. Lights began to flash above the door, and they could hear massive bolts sliding out of place. With a thud that shook the walls, the door began to move, opening up for the first time in centuries. Dust shimmered in the air, while a loud scraping sound filled the hallway. Once the door was open, the guards led the captive soul into the furnace, sitting him down in the only object in the large room, a stone chair. The human laughed as the demons chained him to the seat. "I get to see something that no one has seen in 1,000 years or more." "Yeah, but it'll be the last thing you ever see," Tharn replied. "Maybe, but what a sight." The human grew serious. "I'm sorry to have to put you boys through this. I do apologize." "Yeah, and I apologize for ending your entire existence," Elgor said, sarcastically, standing as he finished securing the chains to the chair. "Fair enough," the human said, laughing. "Christmas is tomorrow, so be sure to spread some love and cheer," he said, with a twinkle in his eye. "Sure, and maybe I'll get a red fire truck for Christmas," Elgor snapped back. "Don't you remember? I already gave you one for your 8th Christmas," the human replied. Elgor stared at the portly man sitting on an oversized stone chair. He didn't have any memory of his human life, but this felt right. It was like an itch in the back of his mind. He couldn't scratch it, but he knew it was there. Tharn finally snapped Elgor out of his trance. "Move. We need to get this over with," he said. giving the other guard a small push towards the door. Elgor and Tharn both walked out of the furnace, leaving the man swinging his legs like a child sitting in his daddy's chair. Once in the hall, Elgor grabbed a clipboard and started filling out the paperwork, while Tharn closed the furnace door. Once the door was shut and sealed, they both stood at their control panels and flipped a switch to activate the furnace. Once again, they nodded at each other before flipping the switch to ignite the furnace. The sudden roar surprised both of them. They had to cover their ears and take a few steps back. The green light on each panel turned red. The walls and floor shook, causing some loose stones to fall from the ceiling. The two demons winced in pain as the roaring got louder. Just as suddenly as it started, the furnace stopped, and the lights on the panel went back to green. A loud grinding noise echoed in the wide hallway as the demons worked the control panel. They stepped back as the door slowly opened. The smell of burnt ozone filled up the corridor as a small amount of smoke streamed out into the hall. The guards stepped forward, their eyes wide with shock. The furnace room was awash in bright holiday lights. The green and red danced happily on the stone walls. There were life-size toy soldiers flanking the doorway, garland and tinsel on all the walls, and Christmas decorations sitting everywhere. The centerpiece of the display was the Christmas tree. It was decorated in hundreds of ornaments, thousands of blinking lights, and yards of garland. Hanging from the tree was an envelope. Growlithe almost walked into Brackmore's office without knocking, which may have been fatal. He knocked frantically until he heard Brackmore's voice say, "Enter," filled with rage. Brackmore looked at the frazzled demon and knew that something went wrong. "What happened?" he said, trying to keep his voice even. Growlithe swallowed hard. "The human is gone, vanished." Seeing Brackmore begin to open his mouth, the terrified demon went on faster. "We don't think he disappeared in the fire. He left behind decorations. And this." Growlithe handed a Christmas card to Brackmore. He read the handwritten card out loud in a flat, tight voice. "Every soul deserves love. Every memory matters. Merry Christmas. P.S. If you try to lock Santa up, don't leave him in a room with a chimney." Brackmore laid the card on the table with care, suppressing the anger that boiled under the surface. "So you're telling me that a human escaped one of the most powerful artifacts dating back to the creation of hell itself?" "Well, there is something else," Growlithe interjected. Carmel, Indiana. Santa Claus, now dressed in his traditional red and white suit, helped a haggard man in his late 20s to his feet. The man looked around fearfully, flinching at every sound. "Come now, Corey, you're safe. No worries about demons or eternal damnation here." Taking another look into Corey's eyes, Santa said, "Let me take some of the pain away." Santa placed his hands on the sides of Corey's face, and both were bathed in a warm, soft light. Most of the haunted look that filled the young man's eyes slowly disappeared, but if you look close enough, you can still see the seeds of pain and madness. What happened? Corey croaked, his voice raw and tender. Well, Santa said, I got a letter from a little girl saying that her daddy died and she wanted him back for Christmas. I get these all the time. Heartbreaking. Santa shook his head sadly. But normally there's nothing I can do about it. However, in this case, it seems like a mistake was made, and I was able to fulfill her Christmas request. I was able to have a bit of fun in the process, too. The man still looked confused and overwhelmed. Santa gently turned him to face a modest ranch house, decorated in Christmas lights, and a blow-up Frosty that was swaying gently in the wind. All you need to do, Santa whispered in the man's ear, is go in there and see your wife and daughter. Go on, scoot. The man started moving after a gentle push from Santa. The man slowly walked up the path to the front door, then hesitated. After a moment, he turned the knob and went inside. Santa's head felt like it was about to split when his grin became even wider upon hearing the cries of relief and joy coming from the house. With a little spring in his step, Santa walked away into the darkness. Brackmore let out a deep growl and slammed his fist into the desk again. How could this happen? He thought. I had planned this for centuries and had every contingency worked out, a way to counter anything that Jack Scratch did, anything except this. He slammed his fist again. The blue light on his map started to blink, indicating that there was a message from Jack. Brackmore stared at it for a few seconds before reaching out with a razor-sharp claw to the control panel and tapping the button next to Jack's name.
Hey, Bracky, how are the wings hanging?
Jack's voice echoed throughout the office.
There are reports that 2 souls were lost in your sector. I've also heard rumors of a demon going crazy and allowing some other souls to escape to heaven. I don't believe it, not even for a minute, knowing how responsible and dedicated you are. But others are talking. The big guy downstairs has opened an investigation. Anyway, just wanted to let you know. Stay gruesome. Toodles.
The red light next to Jack's name went out, but before Brackmore could do anything, the whole map started blinking red. Brackmore's eyes shot to the control panel and saw what he knew would be there. A blinking red light next to the Dark One's name. Trying to control his panic, he reached out slowly and pressed the glowing button. Jack Scratch stood alone in his office. The decorations were gone. No ornaments, no tinsel, just neat stacks of parchments on the desk and a faint hum in the air, like a machine idling somewhere far below. Jack straightened his cuffs and smiled to himself. Well, he said softly, that was educational. He lifted the top parchment, scanned it, and clicked his tongue. Such a shame, really. All that planning, centuries of contingencies. He flipped the page, and undone by something so very unexpected. Jack set the paper down and leaned on his own cane, gazing at nothing in particular. You see, Brackmore always believed power came from control. he said lightly. From locking every door, double-checking every form, keeping everything neat, predictable. He tapped his cane once, somewhere far away. Something answered. But control is a funny thing, Jack continued. The harder you squeeze, he smiled, the more that slips through your fingers. Jack turned slightly and bowed. Thank you for coming, he said, his voice almost sincere. Almost. The powers that be could sense your presence, but they couldn't place you, and in trying to do so, he shrugged. Well, they noticed other things. Jack peered at another document. Things that shouldn't happen in a well-run sector, he went on. Escapes, irregularities, a certain mountain allowing souls into heaven. He clicked his tongue. In case you can't guess, that's a big no-no, he chuckled. Brackmore will spend the next few centuries trying to figure out how a soul slipped through a system that never fails. He'll audit logs, rewrite procedures, blame subordinates. Jack shook his head, almost kindly. He'll blame everyone but himself, especially me. A pause. Ah, the good times ahead. Jack straightened and gave a small wave downward. He'll always lose, Jack said, because he's always looking down. He tipped his head back, gazing upward. I, on the other hand, prefer to look up, toward the mortal world. A grin. Occupational hazard of a talent scout, really. His tone softened, just a fraction. I've grown rather fond of the living, especially when they're dying. Another beat. Sentimental, I know. Jack adjusted his hat, careful not to tip it too far. He gathered a small stack of parchments and tucked them neatly under his arm. I should get back to work, he said lightly. But don't worry, you didn't do anything wrong. A wink you could hear. You were simply in the right place at the right time, and sometimes that's more than enough. The air around him began to shimmer. Oh, and if anyone asks, Jack said over his shoulder, you were never here. A smile crept into his voice. Merry Christmas. I'll be seeing you soon. Laughter followed. The office collapsed into darkness. Somewhere deep in hell, a ledger erased itself. And Jack Scratch smiled. Well, my spookies, that's tonight's little holiday trip straight through the slush and into the furnace. If you made it to the end, please do me a favor and subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. Drop a rating while you're at it, and tell a friend who thinks Christmas horror means one killer Santa movie and a mug of cocoa. Because we're out here proving the season can be cozy, creepy, and absolutely unhinged all at once. And speaking of unhinged, tomorrow on Christmas Eve, it's our final holiday horror story of the year. Well, not including New Year's next week. And it is mean in the best way. Imagine a small town in 1996, a big Kmart packed with last-minute shoppers, and a lonely guy who thinks a cashier's small talk is secret love language. It becomes a holiday plan that goes from romantic to full sleigh ride, SLAY, real fast. The snow comes down, the lights go out, and a man in a red suit starts handing out very different kinds of gifts. And I want to say an extra special thank you to our Patreon podcast boosters, folks who pay just a little bit more to hear their names at the end of the show. And they are Johnny Nix, Kate and Lulu, Jessica Fuller, Mike Eschewey, Jenny Green, Amber Hansford, Karen Weemet, Jack Kerr, and Craig Cohen. And if you want to join them, and over 90 other spookies at weeklyspooky.com/join in supporting the program. I sure would appreciate it, and if you sign up at $15 a month or higher, you can hear your name at the end of the show, just like theirs. But now it's time for me to get back to work. We have one more holiday horror novella to drop on you before the big Christmas day. So for myself, for my executive producers Rob Fields and Bobbletopia.com, my producer Dan Wilder, and of course my creepy composer Ray Mattis, I will talk at you tomorrow. So stay festive out there.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to find your way back next week. But for now, you are safe. Trust me.